Let's make my tree line quilt pattern that uses charm packs, which are 5-inch squares. Now for this pattern, you will need 14 5-inch squares for your trees and 2 5-inch squares for your tree trunks. Then for your background and your border, you will need 1 yard of fabric. With your background yardage, you will cut 28 3-inch by 2.5-inch rectangles and 14 5-inch squares. Then with the remaining background, you will use it for your sashing and border. Then using your 2 5-inch squares for your tree trunks, you will need to cut 14 1-inch by 2.5-inch rectangles. Now to make your trees, you will need 1 5-inch square in both print and background. You are going to place the two on top of each other, right sides together, and sew a 1/4-inch seam allowance all around your square. Afterwards, you are going to cut a 45-degree diagonal twice, and doing so will yield you 4 half-square triangles. And because we are cutting on the bias, you will need to trim your half-square triangles down to a 3.5-inch square. Once your squares are trimmed, you will then place them like so in a flying geese fashion. And for your tree trunk, you will need 2 background 3-inch by 2.5-inch rectangles and 1-inch by 2.5-inch trunk. And place them like so. And then we are going to first sew our flying geese together. And then now we are going to sew our tree trunk section together. And do take your time as this is a skinny piece, but afterwards I am going to force you to trim it down. I did this so just in case some stretching does occur since it is a small piece to work with, but you're going to trim it down to a 5.5-inch by 2.5-inch rectangle. Now you can line the 2 3/4 mark from your ruler in the center of the tree trunk. And honestly, you can eyeball it, but if you do want to be perfect, you can finger press your rectangle in half, then line the press mark on the 2 3/4-inch line on your ruler and then trim the edges. And once again, you are trimming them down to a 5.5-inch by 2.5-inch rectangle. And then now that all of your rectangles are the same size, we are then going to sew everything together until you have formed your tree. Then all you have to do is repeat these steps until you have formed 14 trees. And once all of your trees are finished, you will then sew 2 rows with 7 trees in each row. Then after your tree rows are completed, you will then take one of them and rotate it upside down. Then with the remaining background yardage, you will subcut 2.5-inch by width of fabric strips, and you will use them for your sashing and border to complete your table runner. Your finished table runner will measure as a 21-inch by 42.5-inch rectangle, and for the backing, I am using a Moda Dot Grunge, and for the thread choice, I am going with glide threads in the color Latte. And here is what my table runner looks like almost completed. I still need to sew a binding, but I wanted to make sure I got this video out for you all today. But if you could please take a moment to hit that like and subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you can be notified for your next amazing quilt project.